Hello, hello, hello. This is Jalen Parker here with the Just Good Network, and this is the Fantasy Squad podcast. Joined here by Jasani and Brandon as usual. Happy New Year's, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all the above. Hopefully, you got another gift in 2022, which was a fantasy championship. Or if you're me, you finished dead last in your league, even though your team is not that bad. I know for a fact I don't have the worst team. But hey, that's all a part of fantasy football. So this will be our end of the year review episode, and we're going to kind of, talk about the things that happened this year. And, the fantasy football process, about 75% of the way you win comes from the draft. And let's dive into the biggest draft steals and busts of the year. So, I'll volunteer to go first. And I think this is probably going to be the steal that everyone first thinks of, and that's Cooper Kupp. I mean, he wasn't even the first wide receiver from that team that was being drafted on average. He was getting out. Robert Woods was being drafted before him. Robert Woods was seen as the more consistent and reliable guy because under Jared Goff, we would see Kupp have strong stretches of play and then just fizzle out of even seeing the ball. Whereas Robert Woods was always relatively consistent. He was looked at as the number one option on that team. And with improved quarterback play, everyone thought, the sky's the limit for Robert Woods. But I guess that line of thinking didn't necessarily get applied to Cooper Kupp. According to Fantasy Pros, his ADP was in between the 4th and the 5th round. He was usually the wide receiver 20th to 25, going around guys like Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, he's DJ Moore, Julio, getting picked around that range. And he vastly outproduced every single one of those guys and outproduced every other wide receiver in fantasy. So to me, that was the first draft steal that came to mind. We can go to you, Jasani. Who is the draft steal you want to talk about?
A draft steal that I would say would have to be Gerald Waddle, who's picked in our league around 11. And this year he got over 220 points for you in fantasy. He had 99 receptions, which is crazy for a rookie. One problem was he only had 5 touchdowns, but I do expect that to go up in the following years. But for this year, especially towards the second half of the season, he's been a wide receiver 1. He's just been a target hog for PPR, even for regular. So his receptions have been absolutely insane this year. So I thought that was a great steal in the later rounds.
Yeah, it's fair to say he benefited from the fact that, how many games did Devonta Parker play this year?
2.
Yeah.
And Will Fuller made $2.5 million for each catch he made this year.
Will Fuller's not on the team.
Yeah, he might as well not even be on the team. So
his only competition for targets this year is Gaskin.
Yeah, and he played with his quarterback in college. It is a perfect recipe.
Yeah, and with this draft capital, I feel like we maybe should have been a little bit more vigilant on seeing this one coming because he was just the best option there. But in the offseason, we did have Devonta Parker and Will Fuller, who seemingly looked like they were going to do something this year.
We didn't know that they would instantly disappear.
We didn't know that they were going to go MIA on us.
Yeah.
I think both of them. I think Devonta Parker and Will Fuller are going to lead the team next year. So
yeah, they're going to need to get more receivers again,
or just use Waddle more because they also need they need to fill a lot of holes on that offense. But yeah, I guess I'll go next, and this is kind of in the same. This wide receiver is kind of in the same boat as Cooper Kupp, and the fact that he was on a team where there was another wide receiver on that team that also was getting drafted ahead of him that really should not have been, and that's Debo Samuel. At the beginning of the year, Brandon Ayuk actually had the higher ADP, if you can imagine that. His ADP is around round 6. People thought that he would be the kind of the alpha of this wide receiver core, and Debo was picked in round 8 on average, which is an insane thing about now. But at the time coming into this year, Debo had the health concerns. We had possibly a QB change coming into the year. Kittle was always a stud there, and they love to run the ball. So there was a lot going against Debo, and we weren't really sure what his usage was going to be. And he was just a stud throughout the entire year. He was super consistent. Not only was he a wide receiver 1, but at one point he was RB1, it seemed like. He ended the year as a wide receiver 4, and he averaged 21 fantasy points a game, which someone you can get in the round 8 is just beyond what you can imagine. So Debo is one of my top draft steals of the year.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said. I mean, I was the one with all the hype coming out, and just assumed it was going to be another injury-riddled year for George Kittle, and low-key early on it was.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Debo came through to be just legit. The next guy that I want to talk about, next draft steal, is actually Mark Andrews. You know, the tight end position is one where, like, getting a consistent performer you're going to pay a premium for pretty much. And so, you know, it's all, at least before this season, it was kind of thought like, hey, if you're going to spend early capital on a tight end, it has to be George Kittle, Darren Waller, or Travis Kelce.
Yeah.
And so you were able to hold off on getting a guy like Mark Andrews. I mean, he was going as a tight end 5 on average. He was getting drafted behind Kyle Pitts in most fantasy leagues, right? Mm-hmm. And he was the 50th player taken on average. And so I think while, like, not maybe a steal because he was drafted as a top 5 player, but I think for the tight end position specifically, to get a guy at that point and they finish as the tight end 1 and give you just some absolute game-breaking, week-winning performances, I think is just an absolute steal. And it's probably going to be – he's probably one of those players that I think is going to be on a lot of teams that won championships, because I think getting a steal at the tight end position is kind of the best position to get a steal at, because if you don't have one of those top elite performers.
Yeah, you basically had the advantage that, you know, Kelce owners and even Gronkowski managers of the past had, where, like, they got their tight end in the 3rd or 4th round, and he was just by far the best tight end that year, and it's just a massive advantage the entire year. You kind of got that this year with everyone reaching for those top guys that didn't end at the top, and you just took a tight end at a normal spot, round 5, round 6, not reaching too bad, being able to fill out your roster, and then turns out you had the best tight end of the year. So I agree with your sentiment on there's a good chance that Mark Andrews was a big proponent of majority of the fantasy championship teams out there.
Yeah, and I think even the better part is the fact that, like, he did this while Lamar was having some absolute stinkers, and he did it with Tyler Huntley too, you know? So,
yeah, it's definitely comforting.
Makes it where, like, I mean, do y'all think Andrews is the first tight end off the board next year? It's fair to say they're not going to add any more receivers.
You certainly could. I don't think anyone would really get onto you for that, but I think people are still going to be taking Kelce first.
Yeah, I think Kelce.
And I can see people still taking Waller ahead of him as well. I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm not saying I would, but I can see ADP falling that way, you know? ADP is always a funny game.
Hey, I'll let ADP fall that way, because JP won't fall that way. I'll tell you that. That's I got y'all this time. But yeah, we can go to you, Jasani. Here's another draft steal you want to talk about.
Let's see. I try not to talk about another rookie. I mean, I just thought the rookies have done.
Yeah, the rookies were the steals of the draft.
You can talk about, I mean,
insane.
The best rookie was what, taken in like the 4th round, 5th round?
Well, I thought it was round 8. That was Jamar Chase.
He's taken round 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jamar's average ADP was. Let's see.
All right, I got a steal. I'm gonna have to go with Damon Harris. He was picked for us was round 9. And he's been a solid RB2, if not RB1, in some weeks. He had 14 touchdowns, which is insane.
Yeah.
He had 206. He gave me 206 fantasy points.
Mhm.
He had 191 carries. That's just the Patriot way. They leaned on this power running back style, and with a rookie quarterback, Bill wants to limit his touches as many times as possible. So they're leaning on the run game, and Damian and Ramondre benefited greatly. Definitely Damian. So yeah, I think he was a great steal. If you didn't get a running back and you somehow
Yeah.
got him in the later rounds, he definitely helped out your team.
Mhm. And he was consistent. Like whenever he was healthy, you knew you could just kind of plug him in, and didn't matter what the matchup really was. You could just kind
Yeah,
of count for something.
yeah, that was the problem. He got a little banged up this year with like various things, and then he had COVID. He
Yeah.
missed a decent amount of games, but the fact he still had 14 touchdowns is crazy.
Yeah. And I know going into this, at least in this offseason, the narrative kind of surrounding Damian was kind of like it's a Patriots backfield. You don't want to touch that. Usually it's a three-headed beast.
Yeah,
We don't know what this offense is going to look like. Cam might be there and vulturing. At this point, Cam had a chance to vulture touchdowns from him. There's so many things going against him. But like I remember like hearing like out of Patriots camps. I mean, we talked about this. Basically, them saying like the offense is going to run through Damian, and like some people trusted that info, and some people just kind of took that with a grain of salt. And if you trusted that info, you really got to steal.
See, I trusted that until I started hearing buzz about Ramondre Stevenson. I was like, oh, Bill's just gonna run the boat. that was like, he doesn't care, man. He's just gonna run the boat.
Loki, but Loki, that's what he did. Whenever Ramondre wasn't in the doghouse, he ran both of them.
Yeah. To Harris's benefit, Ramondre fumbled in his first game, like on one of his first carries. So right off the bat, Damian is just like, all right, we're running with Damian as long as we can until we need to use Ramondre. So that definitely worked in his favor. But
even to like the James White injury.
Yeah.
Knowing that like the Patriots love throwing two running backs. James White's, I mean, if you ever got James White in fantasy, he was never a sexy pick, but he would always in a PPR league give you solid like low end RB2 numbers at like he was almost a steal every single year because it would be like
I would never feel bad if I had to start James White.
Yeah, you just had to.
He should never get below 10.
And he would maybe have 5 carries.
So kind of going similar route to Damon Harris on a late round running back steal. I'm going to go with James Conner. He was taken in the 10th round ADP, which is insane because he ended the year as an RB9. Basically, he had the Kenyon Drake year we all were hoping to see last year. He was used heavily in the red zone. He, I believe, did he end up leading the running backs in touchdowns at the end of the season?
I assume so.
I know he was at least in the front running of leading.
I can see JT coming back ahead this past week.
Yeah.
So
he was hurt.
I end up depending on. I'm checking right now. Yeah, James Conner has. How many receiving touchdowns does he have? Because he has 14 rushing touchdowns. Let's see. Yeah, JT. I'm pretty sure JT has more, but like barely.
But regardless, for a 10th round running back, for 10th round pick, a guy that's contending for either first or second in touchdowns is just a steal that you really can't ask for anything else. Technically, he did become, this RB1 territory when his counterpart went down. Chase Edmonds went down. I don't remember when he went down. That's when he really truly saw his RB1 usage. But before that, he was still getting you touchdowns, still showing you RB3 to RB2 numbers. And once Chase Edmonds went down, he went straight into RB1 territory and was probably a reason why a lot of people also made the playoffs. It was just riding the curtails of a free running back one, basically.
Yeah, Yeah, no,
Yeah,
definitely.
the only issue is his health, man. He can never stay healthy.
Yeah.
I
It's just
feel like
like
that's
I
gonna
think he
be
benefits from Chase Edmonds. If he had to be that workhorse guy, I don't think he's gonna be able to survive.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree with that sentiment as well. But he basically was just the Kenyon Drake year that we wanted, but you were able to get him in the 10th round instead of spending like a 3rd round pick on him. So
Yeah.
that's crazy.
but yeah. So the next guy that I want to talk about, and this is one that I feel like probably is a little bit low key, but also was kind of one of those ones that people were like, yeah, if you wait and take this guy, he'll probably end up outperforming your expectations. And that's Jalen Hurts. I mean, he ended up finishing, at least in our league, as the QB9 despite missing one game and having a stinker the game before that. But despite that, he was drafted. I mean, he was drafted as a top 15 QB on average, but he was a top 5 quarterback for most of the season. And he did it in a way where you were comfortable starting him because, yeah, it didn't look good. His passing was not the most consistent on a week to week basis. But almost every single week, he was able to make plays in the running game. That's a big reason why the Philadelphia Eagles are going to the playoffs. And I think that if you're one of those people who is like, hey, why pay premium draft capital on the quarterback position? Jalen Hurts vindicated you because you didn't spend premium position and you got premium production for the most part. So, I mean, he was the 95th player taken on average. He was drafted around guys like Corey Davis, Laviska Shenault, Rojo, Tunyon.
Rojo.
Yeah. I mean, for quarterback wise, I mean, he's drafted. He's usually the 11th to 15th quarterback off the board, and it's like,
yeah.
So,
yeah, I like that.
Do you have another steal you want to talk about, Giussani?
No, I just got disappointments.
I got one more steal I could talk about, and then we can go to bust.
You hit us off with a steal, and then Giussani, you can kick us off with one of your busts from the year.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk about a steal that if we have been doing a fantasy podcast for multiple years, we probably would have talked about this man for multiple years as being a steal, and that is Brandon Cooks. He was taken in the 8th round this year. Pretty sure every year he's taken in about the 8th to 9th round. It's just kind of his home. And every single year he ends the year as a top 20 to top 15 wide receiver, and he just doesn't get any respect for that. And rightfully so. Every single year he's either changing teams or changing quarterbacks or changing head coaches or something. And so there's always something surrounding this man, Brandon Cooks, and it's usually uncertainty and typically not good news. But every year he rises against that uncertainty and puts up top 20 wide receiver numbers. And this year was no different. And he was consistent, and he did it with multiple quarterbacks, and he did it on probably the worst team he's ever done it on. So, I mean, here's my big toast to Brandon Cooks. I'm pretty sure he's known as a steal of the draft every single year. We go into next year knowing he's going to be the steal of the draft because he'll still be an 8th round pick to 9th round pick. And most of us will still just choose a Brandon Ayuk over him or choose a Rojo over him, And I'm going to try and not do that this next year. I'm going to try and trust the Brandon Cooks talent, just kind of being there because he just gets the job done. He just gets the job done.
But when you decide to trust him, he's going to turn into Allen Robinson, which leads us into our bust. Who do you got?
Bust of the year, the perfect segue.
Allen Robinson, man, the absolute bomb of a disappointment. Oh my god!
All year to say this.
Yeah, man. We picked him. I'm sure he was definitely top 5 rounds. We picked him around 4. I'm sure he was definitely a lot of people wide receiver 1, and that was the case. I hope he got one of the steals in later rounds because he absolutely was awful for you in this fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
He only scored 1 touchdown, only had 36 receptions all the year. That's crazy. Only 388 yards, only yielded you 70 fantasy points. That was that's undraftable. But I mean, next year if he goes to a new team, Got to get
It's a
on that. I'm not
trap.
gonna lie. I go right back to that well, man. The talent doesn't lie, man. He's just in Chicago. That's what disappointing part. But yeah,
Yeah.
Allen Robinson's been probably everybody's number one bust of the year.
And what hurts the most about players like Allen Robinson when they have a year like this and they don't get hurt or they don't, do anything to really warrant you dropping them, you feel like you have to keep holding on to them because of the name, the talent, blah, 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 the draft capital. And in reality, it's not the case. You could have dropped him this entire year and it probably would have helped you if you just would have cut loose and maybe put him on, let somebody else take a shot on him, pick him up off waivers. But in reality, you're not going to drop Allen Robinson for a waiver wire pickup. So it really just hurts you for the entirety of the year because he just soaks a bench spot all year, and you can never start him. You just can't.
And everyday point is for Allen Robinson to go off this year. He's in contract year, new quarterback Justin Fields. I was like, he's going to target a wide receiver one of his team. And he's going to try to go off because he's in a contract year. And none of this stuff happened.
Yeah.
The stars did not align. Especially too because even when he was playing, has Mooney been their wide receiver one this year, it looks like?
Probably.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, the offense is just gross.
It's not good.
Perfect segue into our bust of the year. Allen Robinson, the average draft position, he was the 31st player off the board in most fantasy leagues. So he's going around guys like CeeDee Lamb, Mike Evans. You would have taken Swift. You would have taken, on average, Allen Robinson over DeAndre Swift. That's a haunting pick right there.
Over Chris Godwin. You got him over Cooper Kupp. That's tough.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that had to choose between Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson when they chose Robinson. They wanted the consistency.
It was literally the complete opposite.
The next name I would talk about for bust, and then we'll go to you, Brandon, is Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, you see
years now,
who gets that draft capital spent on him, and Clyde looked absolutely electric with the ball in his hands in college. You had, Andy Reid saying he's better than the best running back I ever had. The running back who finished outside of the top 5 of fantasy football every year. Andy Reid was his head coach. And you're just like, he's playing with Mahomes and Kelsey and Tyreek. He's going to see
by Mahomes.
He's going to see double-digit touchdowns. He's going to get to the goal line almost every game probably. He'll get passing game work. And when he rushes, it should be free rushes because who's going to play the run against the Chiefs?
Mm-hmm.
Little did you know Clyde was going to be ineffective with the ball in his hands. He was going to be phased out of the passing game. He was going to be unable to get the ball in short yardage situations. And he was going to be able to stay healthy. It's just – I think Clyde is going to be one of those guys that he's going from, this should be the year to it's going to be a gamble now. He's going to be one of those guys who people take flyers on in the middle to late rounds because, hey, he's still a running back that was drafted in the first round. Hey, he's probably still the starter.
Yeah.
And he's still on the Chiefs offense. And you're going to be hoping for a bounce back and that Clyde can turn his career around because right now it's just not been up to snuff, both for what fantasy footballers are expecting and probably for what the Chiefs were expecting. So
yeah, man, they could have JT.
And what hurts the most about Clyde is when he does go down, which is quite often, and Daryl Williams steps up. Daryl Williams looks great for fantasy. He works great. He gets the catches. He gets red zone targets. It's red zone attempts. He scores touchdowns.
He's good at rushing too, man.
It's everything you want Clyde to be is in Daryl.
They should just make him. They should really just make an RB1, honestly.
The offense kind of works.
I guess they see something in Clyde, or it's just the fact that they picked him in the first round.
probably a little of both. I mean, they hope to see something in Clyde, but it just hurts to see like when you have your RB1 in your handcuff and you're hoping that your RB1 gets hurt so that your handcuff could go in because he's just the better fantasy player. It's just a tough position to put you in.
Yeah. So
and like you said, next year there's probably going to be no clear picture of what to do with Clyde next year. It's going to be just as ambiguous. There's going to be narratives saying that maybe you could get the third round running back, and he becomes this, RB1 that you were hoping to be. And chances are it probably won't happen, but I'm sure a lot of people will be caught grabbing for that bag again next year.
All I'll tell is to the 0 viewers watching right now, you are in the third round. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there. Don't even think about touching it. I don't care what transpires this offseason. You can copy and paste this clip right now. Don't draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first. I wouldn't touch him in the first 4 rounds, at least. I'm thinking.
Yeah, dude. It's just about, man. The players are just only getting more better players. There's just so many players I'd rather have than over Clyde. There's so many running backs.
I think I would put him as someone that I would draft as like a flex with RB something upside.
With
Chiefs running back upside. Whatever that means.
You taking Gibby over Clyde?
I'm not a Gibby fan either, but you kind of have to.
Yeah, he showed some stuff.
He has the opposite problem with Clyde. They give him the ball all the time.
he's too much relied on. He doesn't get a break until he's hurt.
Yeah, that was my next disappointment. Do we need to go to you, Brandon?
Yeah. This is my first disappointment. So for my first disappointment, I'm going to go with a wide receiver who was a free agent this year. He was the free agent darling, if you will, the most expensive man in the free agency. Wide receiver, where is he going to go? Kenny Gallaudet. He runs these smooth routes. He is a classic stud alpha receiver on the Lions. And then ADP was round 6, so he kind of was not that expensive, but I mean, he kind of is supposed to be a starter for your team. And he gave you nothing. His fantasy finish was ass. I think he finished like 150th or something. He had one game that was fantasy relevant, and that was like in week 5. So there's no way you were still starting him then. And you probably didn't start him again after that. So in total, he probably gave you a total of 0 startable weeks, unless you started him week 1 and he bit you in the butt. So other than that, he basically did nothing for your team other than soak up a spot and make you feel like an idiot for taking him over a bunch of other guys that were very good. You're investing in the Giants offense this offseason. You weren't expecting much, but you're expecting a guy getting paid $100 million to be at least the alpha receiver on this team. And I mean, there really wasn't an alpha receiver on this team. There really wasn't anything on this offense. Yeah, they didn't have a single alpha on this team. There was no guy that really commanded anything on this offense. So I guess it's a swing and a miss on the whole offense. But I mean, if you were one of the few like myself that had some shares of Kenny Gallaudet, every single time you saw him on your lineup, it was just painful to just see that name. You see his projection of like 13, and it's not even that high of a projection. And you're like, he's not getting 13. Where are they getting this number from? He's going to get 4, maybe 5. If you're lucky, he could also get you 0. So, Kenny Gallaudet is one of the biggest busts of the year for me.
Yeah, I think going into next season, more advice to everybody: don't draft anyone from the Giants.
Yeah, it's not gonna get better.
Yeah, it's gonna get worse before it gets
better. we see what Darren Jones is, and they don't have a backup that's even better.
And the crazy part is they're bringing everybody back for next season, and so what's going to change? I think this year everyone's thinking we just got to give our young quarterback and our head coach more time, and we can be like Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor.
Yeah, Joe Judge. I've heard some interesting comments on Joe Judge, basically saying that like he needs more credit on this team being really bad than he's getting right now. And he's getting a lot of credit for it being really bad, but
they got to clean house. I think they should just get rid of Daniel Jones, Joe Judge, and the GM Gallaudet, and just commit to being bust for Bryce. That's all you got to do.
Bust for Bryce. Anyone else have another one?
We can go to you, Jasani, if you have another steal or another bust you want to talk about.
Yeah, mine is going to have to be Darren Waller. He was drafted as one of the top tight ends. He only scored 2 touchdowns on the season. He hurt his knee the second half of the season. It's been out ever since. The game he was supposed to come back, he got COVID. But yeah, I mean, a lot of things happened to the Raiders, like his head coach. They went through a lot of turmoil, so it's to be expected that they didn't have the best of season. But Derek Carr still put up numbers, but unfortunately, Darren Waller didn't really benefit from that.
Yeah.
Derek Carr is starting to like Hunter Renfrew more than Darren Waller in targets. He's starting to become his reliable target, and Darren Waller has been falling down in the pecking order. It seems like he only had 53 receptions, 600 yards, and he only yielded you 130 fantasy points. So where you got him, dropped him in round 3, I think it's pretty disappointing season for the tight end.
What's worrying about Waller is when Gruden was there, we know Gruden liked to. He even said, has a quote that his offense runs through the tight end, and so and he had another quote that he thought that Darren Waller is the best player he's ever coached and seen in his life, and that he needs to get the ball to Darren Waller as much as he can. And since he's been gone, you can kind of see that offense is no longer force feeding, Darren Waller as much as they were before, and Derek Carr is spreading the ball around, and Hunter Renfrew is stepping up. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that implicates into next year. What do you guys think about Darren Waller going into next year? Still tight end, still probably one of the top guys.
I mean, I don't see him like he's still gonna be the top tight ends drafted. I don't think 1 year is going to deter people from not getting him.
Mm-hmm.
In a way,
you think he'll fall to the 4th or 5th round? Do you still think he'll be the 3rd round?
Whenever Andrews, Kelsey, and Kittle go, he'll be the next tight end to go.
Yeah.
The people still get him over Pitts, Hawkinson, and all of them. Probably. I mean, would you take Goddard over him?
No. Well, maybe. I don't know. We'll have to see how this offseason goes.
I think you kind of, at least in my point of view, I'd have to kind of look at because to be fair to Darren Waller, he more than likely wasn't having the season that we envisioned from him when he was drafted. But I'm trying to look at his stats now. Yeah, but to be also fair, he hasn't played. He's missed the last 5 weeks. Yeah. I think if you look at his numbers from a pure tight end position before he got hurt, you would take that. I mean, he got double digits almost every game. He had a couple of games where he didn't get it. But I mean,
he really only boomed week 1, right? And then after that,
he really only boomed week 1. All his other games.
It was a 19 target game. Holy crap, I have the best tight end in the league.
Yeah, you're
it was just never the same.
19 targets off rip like that. You're here we go.
You started off on the high, and then it just.
Yeah, he started off and you instantly put him on the no trade list, right? He's untradeable. And then it's just as the weeks went on, his value went down, and now you don't know if you can trade him or what do you do with them?
It's kind of crazy how the Raiders are still playable in the playoffs.
But I think that the trust your quarterback has in you is more important than the offense. I would assume Derek Carr trusts. Now maybe he's developing that little bit of that bond with Hunter Renfrew now. And so maybe
I mean, what if Hunter's just benefiting from Darren Waller being out?
That there's that possibility that it's fair to say that Hunter Renfrew is not only the best of the receivers on the team, but he's the last guy left. I mean, Waller and Ruggs gone. Brian Edwards is
ass.
Yeah.
Can't get open.
He's not gonna be that dude, man. All that vision, he's not gonna be that guy.
No. So that'll create a debate next year for should you fade Waller with the emergence of Renfrew, or will Renfrew take a step back once Darren Waller comes back healthy? That'd be a little interesting debate for fantasy managers to think about in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll tell you
What happens if Devonta Adams comes?
You gotta say Renfrew at that point.
Renfrew steal the draft, bro.
If it's Devonta Adams and Darren Waller, you have to assume.
We're getting some interesting comments today.
We're getting hacked, bro.
They're speaking the same language, which is great.
They're speaking like auto type, bro.
Yeah, they're speaking like computer code.
But yeah, I mean, that is, like I said, just a little debate for next year. I think I saw Devonta Adams, the Packers are more than likely going to franchise tag him.
Yeah.
That creates a whole nother debate for a gamble for fantasy managers to think about next year. I don't see, in my own opinion, I don't see how you can draft Devonta Adams as a top 5 receiver with Jordan Love as the quarterback.
No.
Someone's going to see opportunity cost and say, oh, I could get Devonta Adams as the 5th wide receiver off the board.
Like Devonta Adams, like, would you still take him in like the end of the second round if Jordan Love is his wide receiver or quarterback?
I mean, when he played with Brett Hundley, he was good. I can't imagine Jordan Love being worse than Brett Hundley. But when he did play with Jordan Love, he didn't do anything.
So we can't imagine. Because like if you're taking him at the end of the second round, he's still going to be your wide receiver 1 for that team.
Yeah. I would say there's probably a lot of safer wide receiver 1 options, but
would you take D-Hop over him, knowing that D-Hop wasn't that great this last year, and he'll still be in the same situation?
I don't know. I might look at D-Hop as a bounce back candidate for next year that you can get on the low.
On the LOW, bro. Okay.
Mm-hmm. On the low.
Do you have another bust you could go to?
Yeah. Let's keep it rolling with the New York Giants. I was going to say Kenny Gallaudet, but I remember he had a teammate who was drafted on average in the top 10 in fantasy drafts. And if you drafted him in the top 10, you absolutely probably hated yourself this season. And that's Saquon Barkley.
Silly.
First of all, never take a running back who is coming off a major knee injury and at the time of your draft still isn't even practicing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was so off Saquon this year. I was like,
yeah. It's crazy because going into next year, he'll probably still be like a round 1 candidate if he's still in the Giants.
What I learned, man, never listen to the offseason hype, man. They hype everybody. They're saying, man, this is the healthiest I've ever seen Big Ben. When?
It's like the players who have only seen injured Big Ben.
Yeah.
But yeah, now you can say it's because of injuries. You can say it's because he's on the Giants, but fantasy managers are just going to have to forget about Saquon Barkley's first year in the NFL because it's not the same Saquon Barkley, unfortunately. It's not even the same New York Giants. They've somehow gotten worse, I feel like.
No, at one point in the last 5 years, they looked like they were trending upward, like 5 years ago. And then ever since then, it was like, didn't you guys have a good defense? What happened? Didn't you guys have like a young, thriving offense? What? And then now it's just like they've gone straight downhill the last 2 years. And maybe that's Joe Judge. Who knows?
Maybe that's Jason Garrett.
Yeah.
Everyone on that team has regressed, and it's just.
Mm-hmm. And you can say like, oh, they've all been injured, and it's like
we're gonna stay injured. They're injury-prone guys.
So a lot of people are putting that on Joe Judge. They say Joe Judge works them to the bone, like 365 days a year, and so it's like it's no surprise that they get wrecked throughout the year by injuries because like Joe Judge's style is way too intense for like.
He's trying to be like Bill.
He's trying to be like a Marine.
A drill sergeant.
Yeah.
And that's
He's trying
where
to
Bill
whip
gets
these.
from. His dad was the coach at like Navy or something like that.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I would just think Saquon is probably up there with the bust of the year. I mean, if you,
I think a good lesson we could take into next year is to avoid players on bad teams. Don't just because they're a talented individual in a really bad situation doesn't mean that they're always going to shine through that bad situation. It's probably better to just go for somebody else.
So what about CMC? He's lit in the exact same situation.
Mm-hmm.
He's on an awful team, and he's getting back-to-back injuries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you're not fading CMC because of performance. You're fading him because of injuries. And I think someone's going to take that gamble. And more than likely will end up being me. I'm trying to swear.
They're by the end of the first.
He's going to get taken within the first 6 picks. CMC.
Nah,
he won't fall to 7 or 8.
Dude, these are back-to-back seasons has been disappointing, man. I think this is starting to be a trend. Not necessarily.
I agree with you, but I don't see his ADP falling below 4 or 5.
I think the way I'm looking at it is I'm like, yeah, no way you take him as a top 6. But then I'm like, if I have the 8th pick and CMC is there at my pick, I would lock it up probably no hesitation.
No hesitation. You know, like look at Zeke.
And then,
you know, think about J.K. Dobbins or Cam Akers or something.
Nah, at the top of the first, beginning of second, there's a lot of players.
Well, it's like, I mean, we could kind of like go through the list of like running backs. I mean, would you take a wide receiver before CMC? Any wide receiver?
I would take Justin Jefferson.
You take Justin Jefferson?
Yeah, I would take Justin Jefferson.
You take both those guys over CMC?
Yeah, dude. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I've already said I'm drafting Jamar as my wide receiver 1 next year.
I mean, he was drafted as a wide receiver. I'm not Jamar. Justin Jefferson was drafted as a wide receiver 1 this year as well, and he was still taking like the 9th and 10th pick.
Yeah.
And that's where Tyreek was also taken. So it's like,
okay.
So if that means now we're saying that like possibly CMC would make it to like the 2nd round.
Well, Justin Jefferson's ADP this past year was 23. So
dang,
I think in our league. So even this year, he ended up kind of low key being a steal relative to where like he was drafted and where he finished. I mean, let's see. In our league, which is an 18 league, yeah, he was a 3rd round pick. So, but on average, he was the 23rd. He was the wide receiver 7 on average.
Yeah. I think wide receivers are naturally going to fall because people are like, there's so many wide receivers. I could wait.
Yeah.
So I think that's why. But that doesn't mean I will probably. I just can't. I just don't want to go through the headache of a Hurts CMC on a bad team.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's just like,
that's
yeah,
probably
the
a
upside's
lesson
crazy.
that people should be taken. Yeah.
It's like the upside's crazy, but if there's a wide receiver where the upside is like just as high, might as well just take that.
You'd much rather have Justin Jefferson and another good receiver in the first 2 rounds and end up with Damon Harris in the later rounds. Come on.
Or on and
then
off
like
CMC.
Yeah.
And then like kind of looking at playing on that point you said about like on a bad team. Like when I'm looking at the list, the only running back that was drafted in the top 20 that would quantify as being on what was thought to be a bad team is DeAndre Swift. Every other running back is on a team that's not terrible. You know?
Yeah.
I think the next worst guy you're looking at is like low-key Gibby on Washington. That's like probably the next worst team. And
even Swift is an outlier in the sense that he gets like 15 targets a game. So like like he's he's kind of proofed on that with his
Yeah,
usage.
but and that's kind of like how it was for CMC. Was like the team was so bad. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
CMC is our only way of winning. We're going to run the ball with him, and we're going to throw to him. But yeah, and so those were. Do y'all have any more busts y'all want to talk about? Or?
I got one more to talk about, but we could also move on in time.
Yeah, I'm down for that.
Yeah, go ahead and we can talk about it. No worries.
All right. This last guy is another wide receiver. And he had a lot of hype going into this offseason as well. A lot of narratives going into his offseason. His name's Robbie Anderson, wide receiver for the Panthers. Going into this offseason, he is coming off his best career year of his entire career. It's amazing. He was being used so much. He's getting more targets than DJ Moore last year. And then coming into this offseason, he gets reunited with his QB of the past, who didn't really seem to like him when they were together before. But, you ignore that and just hope that they're still friends. And he also gets thrown a massive bag at him in the offseason. And so much hype, so much excitement, so much narrative. And then week one, he sees one target, 2 targets. He happens to catch one for a 40-yard touchdown, or 70-yard touchdown. But if you didn't capitalize off that week one and one catch touchdown, then you basically got nothing from him. You couldn't use him. You probably couldn't drop him. I mean, you probably could have, but you probably didn't drop him. And he never got hurt as well. He just stayed healthy and stayed bad the whole year. The few games he did have where he showed you 20 points or double-digit points, you definitely didn't have him in. So yeah, Robbie Anderson's my last draft bust of the year. You picked him around round 5 or 6, so right around where you get Kenny Gallaudet. You probably chose how to choose between Kenny Gallaudet and Robbie Anderson at one point, and you couldn't have chose the correct answer.
Imagine there's 3 players in front of you. You need a wide receiver. It's Robbie Anderson, Kenny Gallaudet, and Cooper Kupp.
I can't miss.
I can't take Cooper Kupp. He's playing with no way. I can't.
Yeah, he's always injured. He doesn't have the hype that Robbie Anderson has or Kenny Gallaudet.
Do we know if Matthew Stafford is really that guy?
Yeah, and all that thinking got you nothing. So Robbie Anderson was the bane of my existence this year. I was very excited for him. Fortunately, I listened to my 2 counterparts here on the show after week 1, and I was able to trade him in my Dynasty League after week 1 after he capitalized off his 14-point game. Thank goodness. Or else I would have had Kenny Gallaudet and Robbie Anderson on that same Dynasty team. That would have been.
As soon as he caught that touchdown, I was like, his value was never going to be higher than that.
You jump ship now.
Yeah, that's all you wanted.
Yeah. He definitely bailed you out with that week 1. If you're
did you see Robbie's post-game press conference after Cam's first game back?
No.
Dude. So it was him and Cam did the press conference like together, and Cam was like standing in front of the cameras, and Robbie was just like standing next to him, and like he was looking like he was standing next to actual Superman. Like he had a big smile on his face. Like everything Cam was saying, he was like, yeah. He was so like, dude, he's so happy they brought Cam back, and then the season still went down the drain. So, I think honestly, right now, the 2 franchises that when I look at them, I see not only are their teams terrible, but they look like they're just not headed in any kind of direction. I say Giants and the Panthers.
Oh, I was going to guess that flawlessly. I was totally going to guess that.
Because, I mean, with almost every other team, there's at least a little sliver of hope.
Yeah, with the Jags, it's like you got Trevor.
Even Houston can say
Trevor and another number 1 overall pick coming in.
Even Houston, who came into this year, undoubtedly being the worst team in the worst.
Yeah, I thought they gave up.
Even they are heading in some sort of correct direction, at least compared to the Giants.
Yeah, the Jets are competitive in a lot of games. The Lions are competitive in a lot of games, man. I mean, it's like you could tell when a team is just like, all right, this team's pathetic. I think it's just like, all right, y'all just don't have the players right now, but like, we see what you're doing. You're trying.
I mean, the Panthers are pretty much rotating us three at quarterback. We got Sam, Cam, and PJ Walker in here pretty much. And, I mean, the Giants know they don't have the answers, and they're still bringing them back. I'm just like,
dude, if you're an Eagle fan, are you like not like super happy with like what's going on with your team? You're just like, we got 3 first-round picks, and we just made the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's fair to say that they don't need to get a quarterback.
Yeah. I think Jalen Hurts. It'd be kind of sad for them just to get rid of Jalen Hurts after this year. That'd be kind of like, all right.
I mean, it's like Jalen Hurts has literally turned into exactly what they drafted him to be. They took him in the 3rd round a couple years ago to do exactly what he's doing right now. So it'd be crazy if they were like, we actually don't want that kind of QB at all.
Yeah, it's just like, it's exactly what you drafted him for. Unless like Aaron Rodgers or any of those top quarterbacks say, I want to come there.
Yeah.
It'd just be disrespectful you drafted a rookie for him.
Yeah.
And what are the odds whatever rookie you draft would be better than Jalen Hurts right at this very moment,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, because hey, look, I told y'all, I said I thought the Eagles were going to be okay, but a lot of people, and I don't blame them because I could see how you would say it, thought that they were going to be a bottom 5 team in the NFL this year.
I was saying that because of the coach. I didn't think Sirianni was going to be good at all.
He was terrible for the first couple of weeks, but I'll give him credit for realizing, hey, we should just run the ball with this team.
I thought they were going to be really bad, but I thought they were going to have a lot of wins because I knew they weren't going to be the bottom 2 teams of that division. At least they're going to get a few wins and not be that bad.
So I guess now we can go to waiver wire studs. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the only waiver wire pickup that I could think of this year, and it's probably also one of the waiver wire pickups of the year anyway, and that's our own hometown legend, Cordero Patterson. I feel like Cordero Patterson is an exact example of why coaching in the NFL is important. Cordero Patterson has been the same player that he is now since he got drafted into the NFL Minnesota Vikings as a round 1 pick. The usage has just never been. I mean, the Vikings said you're going to be a returner and you're going to be Randy Moss. It's not Randy Moss. He goes to the Patriots and they're like, "Yo, you're going to be LeGarrette Blount." It's like he's not LeGarrette Blount. He goes to the Bears. They're like, "Yo, you're going to be Tariq Cohen." It's not Tariq Cohen. He comes to the Falcons. He's Cordero Patterson. That's
yes, sir.
I mean, the key has been you line him up in the backfield and you throw to him. You don't run him out of the backfield and you don't put him at wide receiver to pass to him. You put him at running back
and then you pass to him.
But give a sparing amount of rushes and a sparing amount of like slot wide receiver throws.
But say he's a full-time running back.
But he's a running back. You strictly throw it to him.
Mismatches all day.
But I think that that's going to be a position that I think teams are going to start to kind of experimenting with is guys like Debo and Cordero who are like just football players. I mean, they're wide receivers.
In NCAA, man, just athletes.
Yeah, it's just like
position ATH.
Just get him the ball. I think that's going to become a position where teams are going to be like, this is our designated athlete, our designated ball handler, our designated playmaker. We need a play. We just put the ball in his hands. We don't necessarily care where he's lined up on the field, whether it's a run or a pass. I think that's going to become a position where a lot of teams are probably going to look for a little Swiss Army knife.
Kind of like what we said.
The next guy up might be like a Rondell Moore.
But I feel like a lot of teams are gonna get burned with that thinking because not every guy can do what Cordero or Debo can do, and not a lot of people are willing to be the Swiss positions like that. Cordero's a perfect example of just do whatever to get a job. He's like, I'm gonna go anywhere. But like,
Yeah.
you know, some players are like, no, I'm only a running back, or no, I'm only a wide receiver.
But if you're not good at it, you're not going to get playing time. That's the tough part.
Yeah, that's big.
But I mean, because I would put him in the mold of like, I think another player that's in the NFL now that could end up being in use like that is like a Rondell Moore. I mean, early in the season at least, he was getting like at least 2 to 3 carries every game, along with returns and manufactured touches. But yeah, those are. I think that's a little position that we could see. And so yeah, who are some waiver wire pickup y'all want to talk about? You can get us one with just signing.
Let's see. I'm gonna go with. Well, I'm not really sure how many people drafted, but for us, he was on waiver. I'm gonna go with Leonard Fournette. Up until he got hurt, obviously, he's been RB1 for Tampa. In the beginning of the year, he would start off a little slow, but then he definitely picked it up. His main thing was like now Leonard can catch passes now. Before he couldn't, he was mainly just like a downhill running back in Jacksonville. But somehow he worked on that, and now he can catch passes, which is good for him. And he's still a very good runner of the ball, so he had great value for your running back core until he got hurt. But so yeah, I think that was a huge steal if you managed to just pick him up in your teams.
Yeah, and he also had people drafting Rojo in the drafts, right? Like you mentioned before. So there was obviously thought that Rojo would be the RB1 coming into this year. And honestly, there was nothing telling you that he wouldn't be the RB1 coming into this year. He had the great year last year, and there's nothing in the offseason that should have put Ronald Jones in the doghouse. But playoff Lenny really, really carried over to this season. And I mean, you can't blame him because Leonard Fournette looked like he should have had the job. He looked like the RB1 on this team, and he ran great with Brady. So, yeah, I agree. You were able to scoop him up for free and as a free RB1 for the rest of the year, basically. That's a P. Let's see. This last guy I don't want to bring up, waiver wire studs. Is a wide receiver, Hunter Renfrew. We already talked about him today, but he was a free agent in our league as well. I'm pretty sure he wasn't drafted in any leagues that had, because going into this year, there's a bunch of receivers that were seen as ahead of him, including Bryan Edwards, which is shocking. But now, I mean, it's very clear that he is just the best wide receiver specifically on that team. He's the best wide receiver option if you're not considering Darren Waller to be a wide receiver. And he gave you a wide receiver 11 finish on the year. He was pretty consistent week to week, even at the beginning when he wasn't this bona fide starter that he was. He was still seeing around 7 to 8 targets a game. They're usually pretty short yardage targets, slot receiver type stuff. But Renfrew is almost unguardable in the slot. It's kind of weird. I don't know if defenses don't give him any respect, so they don't really cover him, or if he truly is just that shifty of a dude in that position in the slot. But he gets open, and the dude catches balls, and he gets targets, and that's pretty much all you could ask for. I think this is. I know we talked about this before. Like, will this stick going into next year with Waller, with all their guys returning? And I think it will. I think he's kind of shown that he is that dude on their offense that is reliable for Derek Carr. And if one thing Derek Carr would do, I think he has no problems dumping the ball off for an easy pass. So very excited about Renfrew's future as well. But he was definitely a waiver wire steal this year if you were just willing to take a shot on him and look at his numbers and think that was something that was good.
Yeah, man. He's from wide receiver U, man. Of course he's gonna be
good. Yeah, man. And he's only slept on because of his hairline.
Yeah, it looks like he's 40.
He's so
How does Tom
unathletic.
Brady look younger than him? That makes no sense.
It's crazy. He's like 22 years old, and he looks so old. He's got to be the best accountant out there.
So, do either of y'all have another waiver wire pickup you want to talk about, or do we want to dive into playoff guys?
Yeah, I'm done for playoff guys.
I could segue into playoff guys because I have one waiver wire dude that also is my playoff guy.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
So let's hit 2 stones with 1 rock. All right. So This waiver wire, he's also a waiver wire stud, but he didn't really come onto the scene until like week 14 or 13. So you really weren't going to use him until I guess the weeks that really mattered, which was the last, 7 weeks of the season. And that's Amon-Ra St. Brown. He definitely was a free agent for majority of the year. He was a non-factor at the beginning of the year. He was a non-factor in the receiving game on one of the worst offenses in the league. And then all of a sudden, after their bye week, they were like, let's just give him 12 to 15 targets a game for the next 6 games. Why not? And it worked out. They're even giving him rushing attempts and everything. And the reason why I have him double off for 2 segments is because in the playoff weeks, he was ridiculous. If you were ballsy enough to have him and use him during your playoff weeks, it would have been hard for you to lose. In the first round of playoffs, typically 14 and 15, week 14, 15, he had 15 points in week 14 and 23 points in week 15. And then in the championship round, if you played on week 16 and 17, he got you 25 and then 37. So he was going off for you, and you got him for literally nothing. You could have even had a bad waiver pick and still have gotten him sometime this year. So Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a waiver wire stud only for the end of the year, but playoff champion for sure for a lot of teams.
Yeah, I mean, he was a free agent in our dynasty league. That's 10 teams with way bigger rosters. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Lions went from just kind of. I mean, they were like, "Hey, we got to get the ball to somebody." Why not get to the dude whose name is the Sun God? So,
and Jared Goff kind of stepped up these last 4 weeks, right? He wasn't playing as bad.
After Dan Campbell called him out, saying our quarterback got to play better, Jared Goff was like, all right,
Say
I guess
less.
I wasn't.
I didn't realize I wasn't pulling my weight.
I guess I was the number 1 pick at one point.
Yeah, and with him stepping up, and they're hyper targeting Amon-Ra, and they even gave him rushing attempts. He just has a bright future to be that team's guy, along with Swift. They might be a 2-man show next year. So
I think for a rebuild, you're very happy. Nobody expected the Lions to be good. And they're not the worst team in the NFL.
Yeah, they're like they're like bottom 3.
Yeah. With signs of life. They're not just a dead body laying there.
They might have their coach.
Jags are right now.
They might have a head coach at least. And a running back.
But, Johnny, do you want to go next with playoff performer, or you want me to
go? You can go.
Okay. This name, like Amon-Ra, somehow some of the ugliest sounding players who leave a bad taste in your mouth, players who there's just no way you would want to put this guy in your lineup. And that player that came in was a player who I had a sliver of hope. I picked him up at one point in time, and I said, oh, hey, this guy, he's still on the team. I didn't even know. Maybe he'll do something. And that's Seahawks running back Rashad.
I knew it. I knew who you're talking about.
I mean, this is a dude who he got drafted in the first round in real life, and everyone was like, what are they doing? If you drafted him at any point in time in fantasy, people were probably looking at you like, what are you doing? And whenever you see him on the field, normally you would be like, what are the Seahawks doing giving him the ball? I mean, he couldn't stay healthy. He got outplayed, just straight up outplayed by Chris Carson. And that is pretty much what has kept Rashad Penny off the field besides his litany of injuries, right? I mean, I think his one knee injury pretty much cost him the last 2 years, it feels like. But he finally has made it back healthy. And, I mean, week 1 of the playoffs, which he's been playing since week 11, but week 1 of the playoffs was week 14, and that was when he first started to really get run. And he gave you 31 points. I mean, he had 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jeez. Granted, it's against the Houston Texans, so there's always a little grain of salt. But, that was when it first started, and you're just like, he's not good, He's just getting the ball because everyone else is dead. And he responds the next week, and he dropped 5. I won't ignore that. He dropped 5.
That right there is what made me drop him.
Yeah, if you chase the
I was
points
like, I knew it.
31, You probably weren't. You probably were like, no. Why did I buy the Kool-Aid on Rashad Penny? Like, really, it's Rashad Penny. I should have known better than that, right?
Mm.
But then he resounded. He bounced back. In the next 2 games, he gave you 22 and then 35. He was one of the top performing running backs this past of the playoffs. Might have been the running back in one of the playoffs. And he just somehow took home Offensive Player of the Week for the NFC this past week. So, I mean, talk about in the playoffs, maybe this year, just names came out of nowhere. And I get that happens a little bit every year, but like, I feel like it's usually guys that were just hanging on rosters, hanging around, not doing anything, and then they start to perform. Whereas this year, those guys just came out of nowhere. Like, but
Sony.
Yeah, that's my playoff performers. Rashad Penny. Don't drink the Kool-Aid, and if the Seahawks pay him, bring him back. Think they just go ahead and say that to anyone listening now. Don't sip on that one.
Yeah, don't do that. My playoff performer that started to pick up steam towards the end of the season would have to be the ex-Patriot Sony Michel. He started off week 13 against the Jags, 24 carries, 121 yards, got to 24. Then next week he cooled off with 7, and then the playoffs got 13, 23, and 18. So those are definitely some solid RB2 numbers. You'd definitely be happy with that. And I think he was on a waiver for a lot of teams until Darnell Henderson got hurt, and then I think a lot of teams picked him up. And he's been very good for the Rams. He's feeling nice. He somehow overtook the starting job of Daryl Henderson. So I think he was a good steal. And if you had him in your playoffs, and you needed like a third running back, or like when your running backs got COVID, he was the easy plug and play.
Yeah. Yeah, he definitely resurged his career.
Yeah.
Bill just wasn't using him right.
Yeah.
So, do y'all have any more playoff performers to talk about?
I got one more.
I just got like the obvious ones.
Yeah, same.
Jamar.
We could just say Jamar Chase got 64 points in the last week of your playoffs. Probably won you the whole championship if you had him. Unfortunately, he did give you a dud, 1 point finish in week 15, so he may have stopped your advances to making it to the championship. But if you had him, you probably were able to survive. And if you made it to the championship, you just won. I mean, 64 points.
He probably crushed a lot of teams that were up big. He's like, I got this in the bag.
Yeah.
64 in your head.
Yeah.
You lost.
Basically, he dropped 85 points in the championship round over 2 weeks. So one player is basically putting up as much points as you hope your team to put up sometimes. So
as much as my team did put up.
Yeah, exactly. So he literally solo carried championship teams with 1 week. I mean, what can you say about that?
And Joey B, man, he put up 46 points both weeks.
Yeah,
you somehow stacked them both. You clap back.
You were clapping cheeks.
You just gave me an idea for how I win the league next year. I'm going to stack Joe Burrow and Jamar. And then with my first pick, I'll take Mixon too. Mixon, then Jamar.
Hey. Yeah, so the other day all suck.
Make sure I lock up the GOAT, Samaj P. Ryan. But
that's all I have.
I mean, it's fair to say that was probably the fantasy performance of the season, which leads me to next thing I want to talk about, if y'all want to, and that's some of the top fantasy performances of this year. If there's one that leaps off the page that you want to start, I can kick us off. And the first one that I wanted to bring up was actually George Kittle, week 13 against the Seahawks. 9 catches for 181 yards and 2 touchdowns. Even he even got a carry in there because Kyle Shanahan could tell he was cooking. So he said, "Hey, let him run the ball for all I care." And that was when, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'd kind of been feeling disappointed with having George Kittle most of the fantasy season, but he pretty much completely changed the perception with a 4 to 5 week stretch, and that was the big balloon of that stretch. That was the game where you were like, this is why you draft George Kittle and you pay a premium price for a player like George Kittle at the tight end position, because it's fair to say that there's probably only 3 to 4 tight ends that are even capable of dropping a 35 to 40 point game on you. And so, and let alone them actually doing it. So that was my fantasy performance of the year that I wanted to talk about. Obviously, the biggest fantasy performance of the year was the Jamar Chase. No one's beating that one. But if there's another big fantasy performance you want to reflect on or talk about that, where a player delivered another just game-winning performance, we can go to you, Jasani.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Jonathan Taylor against the Bills. He had 32 touches for 185 yards, and let's see, he had 5 touchdowns, 4 rushing, 1 receiver, and he dropped 55 in our fantasy. I'm sure he dropped around 50 in other standard and PPR leagues. And if you had on your team, he most likely won you that week. That was a crazy week, and JT most likely, if he had on his team, won you the champion if he was the number 1 running back. He was all reliable, Mr. Consistent, scored almost every week. He hardly got below 20. So, but yeah, that week particular stood out. It's like, yeah, JT's that dude. Might be better than Derek.
I'm surprised nobody's talking about Derek for fantasy performance of the season.
Hey man, he's dead and gone, man. We forgot about him.
Right. Can't be stiff on me on the couch.
Unfortunately, the guy I had prepared to talk about was George Kittle, week 13 and 14. Jalen. I mean, he was just that dude. That was the game where Debo Samuel was like their RB1 and George Kittle was their wide receiver 1, and neither of them were getting stopped. But I could pivot to a different tight end.
Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I was thinking, or even I was gonna say Andrews.
I'm going for Mark Andrews, week 5 against the Colts. I say this week specifically because this was the first week that he decided to explode. All of his weeks before that, he was basically just like a meh tight end. You know, he's seeing like 12, 15 points. Yeah, Jasani, you remember that. He was doing okay, but he was doing great.
I traded him the week before.
He traded him that week, and I know I needed him that week because Kittle was now down that week, and I didn't have a tight end. I was starting Mike
Gesicki too.
And Jasani bailed me out. He traded me this tight end named Mark Andrews, and I mean, I really liked him, but Jasani hated him, thought he was a bum. And against the Colts, he absolutely popped off. 11 catches on 13 targets for almost 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. Almost scored you 50 points at the tight end position. It was insane. And that kind of kicked off his tight end 1 performance of a year. From that point on, he was basically putting up double-digit points from then on out, and he was a stalwart. He was catching touchdowns every other game. Doing it with different QBs every other week. So, yeah. The big performances from tight ends. Come on.
It was crazy how on the Ravens, I mean, Mark Andrews was the best player on the field, offense and defense at one point. Like, Jesus, man, they're down bad for players.
Down bad.
Yeah, I saw it was like Mark Andrews in the past game. He set the single season receiving record for the Ravens, and I was like, they've never had a wide receiver do this good.
The last receiver I can name from the Ravens that was like good is like Mike Wallace.
I was thinking like Steve Smith.
Yeah, I was thinking Steve Smith also.
That was a minute ago. That was
forever ago.
I guess that's what happens when you have Joe Flacco for like 10 years. They've only been. I think the Ravens have been in existence like since we've been born, and Joe Flacco's probably been the quarterback half that time.
Oof. Not caring about a single game.
But yeah, that was kind of the last segment I wanted to talk about was the fantasy performance of the year. Honorable mention would be Derrick Henry, week 2 against Seattle. Hung 55 points on the Seahawks back when the King was alive. This was his year. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, they activated him from IR. He might play this week.
Yeah. So just as a little send off, if Derrick Henry looks fine in the rest of the season and into the playoffs, and he just looks good. He's playing like Derrick Henry. Is there any worries about taking him number 1 overall?
I wouldn't take him number 1, but
okay.
Definitely in a top 5.
Picks.
Yeah,
top
yeah.
2 picks.
I'd probably go JT then Derrick, to be honest. I don't really see another running back that's supposed to be going ahead.
Yeah, I think it has to go JT and then Derrick in my mind.
You don't want to take Sean Alvin?
No, bro. No.
CMC?
No.
Dalvin?
I would go JT, then Derrick, then Najee, and then all.
Then
I go Dalvin, yeah.
And then probably, I guess.
Running backs, like this year, it seemed like there was an abundance of RB1s and 2s. Now it's like, who's really an RB1? And there's just
I think that I think in fantasy drafts, like last season, I wanted a pick around like 4 to like 7, but mainly like probably like 4 to 5 because I felt like there were 5 high-end RB1s that were available, and it ended up turning out that like all the guys that were drafted in those first 5 picks, none of them reached that.
Only one survived.
Yeah.
Only
and
one
so I think
actually made it through the year.
And I think that thinking is going to affect a lot of people for next year, where it's going to be like, okay, I got to get one of the top. I think the top 3 picks are going to be the most valuable because I feel like the most safe running backs are Najee, JT, and Derrick.
In terms of like injury and stuff.
Injury, offense, usage.
Yeah.
There's the potential. I'll go ahead and say this now. There's a chance Najee could be a bust for next year if the Steelers somehow don't address the O-line.
Somehow bring back Big Ben.
Yeah.
Somehow convince Big Ben to give it another shot.
Is that worse than? I mean,
is that worse?
For as bad as Big Ben has been, he's still not worse than Mason Rudolph. That's the really crazy part.
Is he worse than Dwayne Haskins?
I mean, wait, you said Dwayne? No. No, bro. That's disrespectful a bit.
Is he not the next quarterback up in that team?
Nah, it's gotta be Mason Rudolph.
Yeah, it's Rudolph, bro. Big Ben got hurt. They played Rudolph. That was like they didn't even let Dwayne come near the field.
Bro, how are they still letting Rudolph on the field?
Bro,
how are they still paying him money?
You have to think if they had probably like any other backup quarterback, Ben wouldn't have been starting because Ben is not like a starting level quarterback at this point.
They had Gardner Minshew.
Yeah. Yes, if they had Gardner Minshew would have took that quarterback room over.
They actually might be in playoffs.
Only quarterback I think that's worse is Mike Glennon.
Yeah, I think as long as Najee's in like the passing game, I think he's always gonna have like a steady floor.
Yeah, and I think Tomlin will make sure that he'll at least see the volume. But to Jalen's point, there's a good chance that this will just be the worst offensive ever. And kind of trying to take lessons from this year, moving on to next year. You don't want the running backs on quote unquote bad offenses.
I would kind of compare Najee to like this is just the worst case scenario in my mind. It's like what Leonard Fournette was doing in Jacksonville.
but what we do have in his hope is he does have a good coach that knows how to like get an offense going. So we can assume that they won't be coming into next year. Exactly. So we could assume that they won't be coming into next year with Mason Rudolph as their quarterback. We can just assume they're either going to acquire one of these studs or draft a young buck. But if they draft a young buck who's, quote unquote unproven rookie, do we treat that QB situation as a better QB situation than
They
having
don't
Big
draft a
Ben?
whole lot at all.
Or
Unless
do we
he's
just
mobile. If he's a
do we
mobile
just see it the
quarterback.
same thing? Yeah, but that mobile quarterbacks don't help your running back. They like quite opposite of your running back.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Like that would be the
they
worst
have
case
to
scenario.
adjust the whole line.
They have to address O-line and quarterback. I think if you come into next season and somehow Big Ben is under center or Mason, it's crazy because it's like Big Ben is not a starting level quarterback, but like
He's the best option they have.
He's the best option in that building. Mason Rudolph, like I watch him play and I'm like, how did he ever get drafted? And Dwayne is like, you're not even getting to dress out, and you're competing against Big Ben and Rudolph, like.
You're competing against two dudes that shouldn't be like on a team right now. Yeah.
So, well, is there anything else you all want to talk about?
But if Aaron Rodgers goes there, man, I'm gonna have to take Najee number 1.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, so like if Deshaun, Aaron Rodgers, or Russell Wilson end up there, then Najee.
I'm all the way on Najee.
Yeah,
you should take him over Derek. I think the only running back you take over Najee would be JT.
Yeah, dude.
But even then, you could even argue, be like, yeah, but Aaron Rodgers is on the Steelers now. He'd be like, all right,
Carson Wentz versus he's playing with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. Wentz hates throwing checkdowns to running backs. I have noticed that. So.
That's because Wentz would rather throw a 60-yard incomplete pass.
Wentz loves PI. Yeah. He loves underthrowing deep balls for PI. And I'm like, I can't tell if he's doing it on purpose. Like if he's just like, if I underthrow it, it'll be a PI. Or if he's just like inaccurate.
He's just not a good QB.
Yeah. But yeah, is there any other things y'all want to talk about?
No.
Well, all right. Thanks for joining us then. Good fantasy talk, good fantasy season, even though I finished dead last, but we're not going to talk about that.
Number 1, we are the champions.
We got to present Jasani with the trophy at some point in time, but it's okay because the trophy will be back in my hands next year. So.
Yeah, by chance.
2022 is the year of the underdog. First, we got Bama. Next, we got my fantasy team.
Oh, Bama's no underdog. Get out of here.
Well, all right. Hopefully, we helped some of y'all win some fantasy championships. And hopefully, you're going to come back and let us help you do it again next year. Fantasy Squad Podcast. Jalen, Sonny, Brandon Toomey. Presented by Just Good Network. And have a happy 2022. And hopefully this year goes better than last. Let's do it. All right.